Hello learners. In this second video on sculpture in India, the focus of our discussion will be basically the developments of sculptural tradition in medieval India, the regional variations in sculpture of India, and the present state of sculptural tradition and style in the contemporary times. So let us start our discussion with the medieval period. Regional variations in the style of sculpture during the medieval period, that is 8th to 12th century, was marked by a large number of states and dynasties such as Pratiharas in the north, Palas in the northeast, Chandelas of north central India, and Rashtrakutas in the Deccan. Most of the dynasties of medieval India followed Hinduism, though they also patronized Buddhism and Jainism. We all know that the consolidation of the Islamic Empire took place in the later part of the century. However, due to differences in the religious beliefs, there was a marked change in the style and the images as far as the art of sculpture is concerned. The style of Indian art sculpture is largely determined not by dynasty but by region. Every region and period produced its distinct style of images, largely independent of any dynasty that happened to rule over a specific region. So, we find that the influence of regional patterns are very important as far as sculpture is concerned. With the breakdown of the Gupta Empire, there was marked changes in the sculptural tradition from 7th century onward. There were changes in the proportions, graceful movements, as well as the various form of metals that are used. We find this new changes from the beginning of 8th century. The artist emphasized breadth, but with a feeling of rhythm. There was more focus on simple structures. The decorative details were restricted. In the 9th century, there were distinctive changes in the northern Indian style, where again the focus was more on the life of the ordinary people. Sculpture reached its standard of elegance during the medieval period. The earlier works were modified, but they were not lost. The sculpture at the Shiva temple at Indore or Telika Mandir temple at Gwalior are examples of the new changes. By 10th century, the convention of northern Indian sculpture was well established. The Lakshmana temple at Khajuraho and the Parasnath temple in Rajasthan are examples of the sculpture tradition. The style had become harder and angular, and the figures were decorated with lot of jewellery. In the 11th century, we find that huge temples were constructed which were adorned with exceptional sculpture and are found all across northern India. The carvings were conventional, the features were rigid, and the ornamentation was in certain cases repetitive also in nature. We had lot of such temple building activities in Gujarat, where lot of uniformity in the sculptural tradition was found. In the 12th century, the traditional sculptural tradition of North India seems to decline. However, we find sculptural work in Kashmir which was most massive. We can understand the Gandhara influence, and the changes took place as far as the overall figures were concerned, and this can be seen from the sculpture from Avantipura. Now, the sculptures at the regional forms are very different. As far as the sculpture in eastern India is concerned, the flatness of planes and angularity was one of the most important factors. However, they became less prominent, and the figures had a sense of mass and weight. This can be clearly seen from the sculpture from Konark in Orissa. 9th century was the most flourishing period when a series of images representing the gods and goddesses of Buddhists were made at Nalanda. The images of 10th and 11th century were more decorative. By the time it was 13th century, the style became more graceful, and India widely used wood as also a material. In Bengal and Bihar, bronze sculpture developed, which is evident in sculptures discovered from various sites of Nalanda. The ruined Buddhist stupa near Ghaspur, Vidisha in Malwa has 4 majestic Buddhas and can be dated back to 8th century. The Buddha on the southern side is accompanied by the Bodhisattva. The surviving structural temples of the 8th and the 9th century in central India and Rajasthan belong to Pratihara style. This style is derived from the Gupta style with regional variations. The Pratihara temple walls are decorated with single band of sculpture. Pillars with lotus designs and elephants on walls were carved. The late 9th and the early 10th centuries saw the Maha-Gurjara style with tall shikharas, decorated door frames and mandapas. The mandapas, shikharas and the walls of the temple were extensively used for sculptural tradition. During this time period, the Chandelas were the greatest power in central India. They were great builders of temples, tanks, forts and palaces. The capital Khajuraho was the principal site of sculptural activity and was the highest point of building activity. The Khajuraho temples are famous for their exotic relief panels, which illustrate the tantric practices of certain medieval cults. In these temples, we find various sculptural traditions which are geometric in form with floral designs and postures of female. Now, after this, there is a sudden decline in the sculptural artifacts. With the coming of Turks, the sculptural activity carried out by the rulers and the nobles came to a temporary halt. The walls of the tombs and palaces were decorated, but they were generally decorated with the use of geometrical figures, and calligraphy was widely prevalent. However, during the time of Akbar, he invited guilds of indigenous artisans and gave them freedom to experiment. So, in this way there was a unity and continuity in the art of India. The depiction of motifs, birds, human and supernatural beings constituted the chief mode of art of ancient India as well as that of Jains and Buddhists. So, we find similar motifs carved and sculpture decorated in red sandstone in large number of monuments. We have these monuments which were built both by the regional rulers as well as some of them were also designed under the regime of Akbar at Agra and Fatehpur. The Mughal sculptural tradition focused on beautiful barricades having elephant mouths. Tusk and trunk was widely used as far as the sculpture art in forts was concerned. We have a number of forts which were built during this time that depict large number of carved elephants, parrots and peacock. Apart from these motifs, the Mauryan mandap of the Agra fort is also treated with essentially an important piece of architecture because it is essentially focused on Hindu design and motifs like chakras, swastik, lotus and few animals. However, the subsequent Mughal emperors did not try to patronize this art, and the focus was more on paintings during the time of Jahangir and on architecture during the time of Shah Jahan. However, we do find sculpture in the form of marble, pieces of marble in the shape of mini monuments, jalis and miniature animals do appear, but they were not extensively found. With the coming up of Aurangzeb, this whole activity saw a reversal because there was a prohibition on the image making, carving and other activities. So, learners, as far as sculpture is concerned, the focus was primarily on Petra dua, inlay colored and semi precious stones carved and inland stonework during the Mughal time. However, the ancient Hindu temples that survived and during that time was very much popular, and lot of activities continued side by side with the patronage of rural workers. We find during the Mughal times excellent craftsmanship in this tradition when we visit tourist places such as Taj Mahal or the Jama Masjid Mosque, Red Fort. We are able to see the inland stonework, the depiction of flowers, also scenes from the Mughal court and the life of the common man. During the Mughal period, the marble was the generously used and one of the important features of the Mughal sculpture. We find that white marble was a popular building material, and most of the religious buildings were also carved out of marble. The Mughal sculpture clearly states the influence of both Persian and the Indian style. The stone construction, shallow arches and the rich ornamentation, carved pillars and columns was typical Indian features that were incorporated in the Mughal architectural or the sculptural traditions. So, we have chhajjas and jharokas, we had the projecting balconies, we had extensive use of tile work, and in the mosques we do find the garden which was dividing the entire structure into center points and use of domes and the influence of Persian tradition. So, the Mughal sculpture was responsible for introducing new features such as double dome, decoration with flowers, and the Indian sculpture just reached its height during this time period. The regional rulers focused more on the temple construction activities. So, the temples were decorated both externally and internally with sculpture. We find statues in either stone or bronze which were dedicated to the religious cult, and we had several pavilions which housed the monumental figures of divine animals such as the bull Nandi of Shiva or the Garud bird of Vishnu or the Vahara boar of an avatar of Vishnu. So, we have abundance evidences to show that the sculptural production emerged as a great style, though it was not centrally patronized and developed at the regional level. The style became increasingly complex, and in Bengal we had a new style which was the Pala style that developed as far as this tradition is concerned. The artistic developments were focused more on the adornments, embellishments, use of multiplication of arms, number of heads representing the same god. So, there was a trend for dynamic movement, focus on emotions and attitudes, whereas the southern Indian style during that time showed more calm and balanced attitude towards representation of lively subjects such as dance of Shiva. So, in both northern and southern India, the height of religious culture in the 10th and the 12th century came up with the new features. We had beautiful sculptural styles of Bhubaneswara in Odisha, Khajuraho in Madhya Pradesh, Konark again in Orissa, and the regional styles such as those of Gujarat, Rajput and other northern provinces. They came up with their own variations and the artist experimented with it. The sculptural decoration in the Mukteshwara temple at Bhubaneswar is well appreciated. We have the sculpture of a dancer, and this tradition was widely used in the decoration of temple. The styles of Bhubaneswar and Khajuraho are closely related despite the fact that there is an immense geographical distance that separates them, and they appeared in different kingdoms also. However, the styles express the typical medieval and feudal society. The phases of these styles is well illustrated by the exterior decoration of the temple of Mukteshwara. Here we find lot of female representation which is related to the local traditions of that time. We also get evidences of divine or literary themes, a woman with a bird, or the one who touches with her right foot the trunk of a tree. So, these are some of the examples of the sculpture that is found during this time, and we find that the facial features were styled and the focus was more on eye movement, sharpening of the nose, which tended to be pointy, and this led to the development of a specific type of facial expressions. So, this sculpture is still with us. We can visit these sites as well as experience them in various museums. The temples at Mount Abu built around 1239 AD also focus on the medieval sculptural characteristics. Some of these characteristics even persisted up to 19th century AD. We have examples of sculptural tradition in Chamba, Kangra, Kulu and Kumaon districts, which belong to the hilly regions of India. Images were decorative and were basically focused on the mythological traditions. We have outstanding sculptural pieces which are found at Kashmir, and they show a deep influence of the Gandhara school of architecture. So, learners, we have tried to understand that though there was differences in terms of the royal patronage that was given to the artist in the northern India, we do find that the sculptural tradition continued in a big way in southern part of India. We have sculpture at Mahabalipuram, which is a great example of medieval sculpture. We have sculptures of the temples which are related to various gods and goddesses, and the sculpture of the 10th and the 11th century are carved in flatter planes. They had more angular forms. We have sculptural traditions which we find in the temple of Tanjore. So, these structured halls of the temple indicate the mudras, and the gopuram also indicate the sculptural tradition. In southern India, bronze sculpture occupied a special place and it has its own role. During this time, we had lot of bronze sculpture. These sculpture images represented Hindu gods. Some of them are still worshipped at various temples of southern India. Karnataka possessed a flourishing school of sculpture during this time, which we can see at the temples of Pattadikal. Similarly, in Maharashtra, the cave temple at Ellora are examples of this phase of sculpture. A series of panels depict incidents from Hindu mythology in high relief are found in the Rameswara temple also. The Kailash temple also has a remarkable group of elephants struggling with a lion all around its plinth. So, we find that during the 13th and the 14th century, a distinctive style was developed by the Hoysala dynasty. The art of South India got a new impetus in the hand of the Pallavas, who patronized the artist. The artist used metal as a medium of expression, and this period is remarkable for excellent sculpture in bronze. The subject matter was mainly religious. Over 35 bronze images of the Pallava age are identified in various temples. Shiva has been seen in various moods. Appears to act of granting in case of the various lifestyle images. We find that best image of Shiva is found in the South Indian metal art during this time period. The next dynasty which helped in the development of sculpture is the Cholas. The Cholas were the most celebrated rulers of the Sangam age who gave extensive patronage to art. We had nearly 23 Chola rulers who had taken control of the empire for around 400 years, and we find development of sculpture with reference to ornamentation. Images of Parvati from Tanjore are now available in the various art museums. The artistic ideas of the classical Chola art of the 11th century find full expression in the Nataraja image, which is still available with the government museum at Chennai. The movement of art under the Chola continued for a long period with lot of experimentation. Some of the later Chola rulers such as Balakrishna had patronized, and the sculpture is available in various museums. So, learners, we have studied that the Pallavas, Cholas, Pandyas continue to patronize sculpture with related to temple tradition. These sculptures were primarily classical in form and focused on the various aspects of day-to-day life. The cave shrine at Elephanta is another great monument of the Rashtrakutas, which contains the famous Mahesh Murti. The three heads emanating from one and the same body representing three different aspects of Lord Shiva. The central face with a calm and a dignified appearance shows him as the creator. The one on the left with a severe look portrays him as the destroyer, and the third to the right with a calm and a pacific expression. So, the mighty Cholas who succeeded the Pallavas and ruled over southern India from the 9th to 13th century created the greatest temples at Tanjore and at Cholapuram, which have lot of evidences related to the development of sculpture. The Brideshwara temple is one of the most mature and majestic as far as the Chola temples is concerned, where we have gracefully modeled sculpture figure with fixed poses, delicate ornamentation, pleasant faces which added charm to the work. So, the Chola art was also influenced by the art from Ceylon, as well as we had artists who travelled up to Java and Sumatra also. During the 17th century, lot of work was done under the kingdom and patronage of the rulers of Madurai and Tanjore. Animal motifs can be seen with fantastic details at the Sri Rangam temple in Tiruchirappalli. So, the style is full of experimentation. We had furious horses whose heads support the pillars and are carved with great skill and vigor. The riders are shown in realistic poses trying to control them. So, each sculpture is realistic and the conception is extremely fantastic. The tradition of stone sculpture, however, continued during this time. The sculpture was, as I discussed with you, was not well patronized by the medieval rulers and the Islamic rulers. Similarly, the British time also we do not find much of the evidences related to the sculpture tradition. So, learners, the entire sculptural tradition of India developed and was patronized by the regional rulers. So, in the west of part of India, we had the marble sculpture which we found in Gujarat. In Rajasthan, we had the Jain temples at Mount Abu. We do have images of four-armed Vishnu, the Hindu god of preservation. The weapons during this time were more as shown as personified, and there was conventional decorative motifs such as the miniature images of Brahma and Shiva. The Dilwara temples of Mount Abu are outstanding examples of Western school of Jain tradition. They are sculptural masterpieces which tell us about the efforts and the imagination of the sculptural artist at that point of time. The Hoysala dynasty in southern India also focused on the development of sculpture in the Mysore region. The temples they built at Belur were full of decoration. They again focused on ornamentation more than the movement or the grace of human body. Hoysala sculpture is highly embellished, overloaded with ornamentation, but on the other hand we find that in the Kashmir sculpture we have the memories of the Gandhara school and the influence of Gandhara school. So, learners, we have studied in this video that sculpture is very much linked with the various art related activities in the different phases of Indian history. We had flourishing schools of sculpture during the ancient times. We had the Mathura school as well as the Gandhara school which flourished, and during the medieval time it is the southern Indian dynasties that helped to preserve this cultural tradition, developed new forms of sculpture, used bronze as a model, and on the other hand the Mughal sculpture tradition was highly influenced by the Persian traditions and the use of white marble. As a student of tourism, it is essential for you to understand that today we find this specimen of art in various museums of India. Museums play a very important role in the preservation and conservation of these sculptural artifacts. They are visited by cultural tourists who are interested in understanding the evolution, the changes and the developments in the sculptural tradition of India. It is good to visit these museums so that we can understand how the tradition of workmanship evolved, what were the changes that the social structure had undergone, and the influences of the various styles both in the north and the south in terms of the sculptural tradition of India. Thank you.